You can keep your title as Vice President, Jonathan, but my son, Preston, is taking over as Chief Financial Officer starting today. To make this work for the corporate budget, we need you to take a 25% pay cut. Those were the exact words from my boss's mentor, Richard Montgomery, at 8:45 on a rainy Monday morning. I stood at the head of the mahogany table at Montgomery Logistics, entirely paralyzed. For 16 years, I had poured my soul into this corporate supply chain firm, single-handedly scaling it into a $135 million global empire. I walked into this meeting expecting my long-promised promotion to full Chief Financial Officer. Instead, I was staring at Richard's 29-year-old son, Preston, a recent graduate with zero corporate finance experience. Preston was scrolling on his phone, casually adjusting his expensive watch. He looked up, gave me a sugary smile, and said, "Thanks for understanding, Jonathan. I am going to need your office space cleared out by mid-morning. It has the best light, and honestly, your standard business attire does not fit the modern elite aesthetic we want for the executive suite. You can use the cubicle down by transit while you train me." What Richard and his arrogant son did not realize was that they had just triggered a catastrophic chain reaction. My name is Jonathan Vance. I am 54 years old, and as the Vice President of Finance and Acting Chief Financial Officer, I was the literal engine holding Montgomery Logistics together. In that moment, a cold wave of absolute clarity washed over me. The burning anger inside my chest instantly froze into pure strategy. "I see," I said, my voice completely calm and level under pressure. Richard nodded, looking relieved that his loyal workhorse was not causing a scene. "Good. Preston has a massive corporate signing bonus, so adjusting your salary helps us balance the executive allocation cleanly. We knew we could count on your loyalty, Jonathan." That was his first mistake. He mistook my silence for compliance. I looked up at the sleek digital clock on the boardroom wall. It was 5 minutes to 9. I neatly capped my fountain pen, slid it into my pocket, and closed my leather portfolio with a soft click. I stood up, smoothing down my blazer. "I will not be needing the cubicle, Preston," I said quietly, looking directly at the boy, who thought he could inherit an empire over breakfast. I turned my gaze to Richard, the man I had treated like a mentor for over a decade and a half. "And I will not be adjusting my budget for your signing bonus." I walked toward the heavy glass doors of the boardroom. Richard frowned, clearing his throat. "Jonathan, where are you going? The meeting is not adjourned. We need to go over the international ledger before 9:30. I did not answer. I stepped out into the hallway, walked straight past my office, without stopping for my personal things, and entered the elevator. As the metallic doors slid shut, the digital clock clicked over to exactly 9 o'clock. I reached into my bag, pulled out my corporate phone, and powered it off completely. I whispered to myself that Richard had absolutely no idea that by forcing me out, he had just signed his own company's death warrant. To understand why my walkout at exactly 9 o'clock was an absolute death blow to Montgomery Logistics, you have to understand the sheer volume of blood, sweat, and tears I poured into that company over the last 16 years. I was not just an executive who stepped into a comfortable, pre-built corporate machine. When I first walked through the doors of Montgomery Logistics, it was not a $135 million empire. It was a chaotic, bleeding, struggling six-man operational warehouse operating out of a cramped industrial park with broken heating and leaking ceilings. The business was facing imminent bankruptcy within 3 months, its bank accounts overdrawn, and its suppliers threatening to seize its minimal inventory. Richard Montgomery was desperate back then. He broke down in front of me during my interview, admitting he did not know how he was going to make payroll the following week. I took a massive professional gamble. I declined offers from established financial institutions and chose to stay and build. I worked grueling 110-hour weeks, practically living on a cheap cot I set up in the back office. I single-handedly built their entire accounting infrastructure from scratch, moving them off messy handwritten paper ledgers and onto a highly secure automated tracking system. I managed every single dollar of volatile cash flow that kept the lights on during those dark early years. But that professional dedication demanded a devastatingly high personal price. I gave up my late 30s and 40s to build Richard's dream. I missed my only sister's wedding because an international shipping crisis ran over schedule on a Saturday night. I skipped countless birthdays, holidays, and family milestones, always telling myself it would be worth it in the end. Ultimately, my intense focus on the company led to a painful, quiet divorce. My ex-wife told me she felt like she was married to a ghost who only came home to sleep. I sacrificed my own happiness and postponed starting a family because I prioritized Richard's constant late-night corporate emergencies over everything else in my life. I even used my own personal credit cards to float the company's first major payroll 16 years ago when a client check bounced, risking my entire financial future for a company that was not even mine. I vividly remember the terrifying winter 7 years ago, when the company's primary bank threatened immediate foreclosure due to a sudden logistical bottleneck that froze our supply chain. Richard was completely paralyzed by fear. His entire personal estate was tied up as collateral. If the bank pulled the plug, he would lose his home, his cars, and his reputation. I did not hesitate. I stayed awake for 84 consecutive hours in a freezing office, fueled by cheap coffee and pure adrenaline, manually restructuring their entire complex debt portfolio and negotiating directly with cutthroat corporate bank lawyers. I saved his personal estate from absolute ruin. Throughout every single one of these intense struggles, Richard constantly relied on me as his financial savior. And he would pat my shoulder, look at me with tears in his eyes, and treat me like a cherished member of his own family. He repeatedly promised me, year after year, that once the company finally crossed the $135 million revenue milestone, I would be rewarded for my invisible labor. He explicitly promised me 15% equity in the firm and the official permanent title of Chief Financial Officer. Having crossed that exact financial milestone just last quarter, due to my meticulous financial structuring, I genuinely believed I was finally on the cusp of achieving my ultimate career dream. Sitting in my car in the corporate parking lot, watching the rain hit the windshield, the reality finally set in. I realized, with a sickening thud in my stomach, that I had traded my prime years, my marriage, and my personal happiness for empty, manipulative promises made by a man who never saw me as a partner. He viewed me merely as a highly efficient corporate tool meant to enrich his own family lineage and build an inheritance for his spoiled son. I looked down at my old leather-bound work journals, detailing 16 years of sacrifices, and a slow, cold smile spread across my face. I realized that while I had given Montgomery Logistics its structural foundation, I had quietly kept the keys to the vault. Richard and Preston saw me as someone who merely typed numbers into a spreadsheet, an expensive line item they could easily downsize to save a few dollars. What they completely failed to comprehend was that I had not just been tracking the company's money. I had engineered the invisible financial architecture that kept the entire $135 million empire from imploding. Over my 16-year tenure, I quietly built operational safeguards that were hardwired exclusively to my professional identity, creating a system that literally could not function without my daily manual validation. The first hidden pillar of my leverage was a proprietary dynamic tax routing algorithm I designed entirely from scratch during my late nights at the office. This was not standard accounting software. It was a complex adaptive financial network integrated directly into our global supply chain infrastructure. The algorithm automatically calculated and adjusted our international shipping routes in real time to shield Montgomery Logistics from aggressive cross-border tariffs and custom penalties. What leadership did not know was that this single system quietly saved the company over $12 million every single fiscal year. Furthermore, I held the intellectual property patent for this algorithm under my own private limited liability company, legally licensing it to Montgomery Logistics on an at-will basis. Because I built the code myself, I was the only person who understood how to update its weekly compliance patches. Without those updates, the entire shipping system would automatically revert to standard international tax rates, instantly vaporizing the company's profit margins. But that annual $12 million saving was nothing compared to the second financial asset I controlled, the company's lifeblood. To keep a massive global logistics firm running, You need an enormous amount of immediate liquidity to fund daily fuel costs, port fees, and freight contracts. I had spent 4 years negotiating and securing a massive $58 million rolling credit line with our primary institutional lending bank. Because the physical assets of Montgomery Logistics were highly leveraged, the bank had agreed to issue this massive funding under two strict conditions. First, it required my personal financial compliance credentials as the sole authorized manager in strict accordance with the Sarbanes-Oxley Act. Second, it required a daily physical validation code generated by an encrypted biometric hardware security token that never left my personal keychain. Every single morning before the international markets opened, the bank's automated servers would ping my specific hardware token to verify that the acting chief financial officer was still personally overseeing the capital allocations. If that token failed to synchronize, or if my biometric signature was missing from the daily compliance portal, the security protocol was absolute. The bank's risk algorithms would immediately flag the accounts, automatically freeze the entire $58 million rolling line of credit, and throw Montgomery Logistics into a state of technical default. Richard was so detached from the day-to-day mechanics of his own business that he genuinely believed our bank transfers happened by magic, completely oblivious to the small black token riding in my pocket. The final and most explosive piece of hidden leverage lay within our client relationships. I was not just managing back-office numbers. I was the primary relationship manager for our top 3 international sovereign wealth fund clients. These 3 massive accounts alone represented over 72% of the company's total annual revenue. These sophisticated foreign investors did not trust Richard, whom they viewed as an unstable, boastful salesperson. They trusted me. Because of this deep professional trust, I had personally negotiated every line of their multi-year contracts. During those intense contract negotiations, I ensured the insertion of a standard but devastating legal safeguard, a strict key personnel clause. This clause explicitly stated that if I, Jonathan Vance, ever ceased to personally oversee, validate, and audit their capital allocations, the multi-million-dollar contracts would become instantly voidable. The clients retained the legal right to pull all their funding and walk away with a mere 24 hours of notice. Richard and Preston had spent months celebrating our valuation, completely blind to the fact that 72% of that empire was legally tied to my employment. As I arrived home on that rainy Monday morning, I unclipped the small black biometric hardware token from my keys and placed it gently on my kitchen counter. I looked at the digital clock, knowing the bank's automated servers would attempt to ping it in less than 12 hours and find absolutely nothing but silence. And to understand why I walked out without a single trace of guilt, you have to look at the absolute disrespect that unfolded during the 48 hours leading up to that boardroom betrayal. The breaking point did not actually start on Monday morning. It began over the weekend when my automated forensic auditing software flagged an alarming series of massive anomalous corporate expenditures. A company credit card newly assigned to Preston Montgomery had been aggressively swiped across Europe for tens of thousands of dollars. The ledgers showed 5-star luxury hotels in Paris, high-end designer shopping sprees, and multiple first-class flights, all crudely miscategorized in our system as essential international market research. On Sunday afternoon, driven by my deep-seated loyalty to the firm, I called Richard into a private meeting at the office to present the evidence of this blatant financial malfeasance. I expected him to be shocked, or at least grateful that his vice president of finance had caught the breach before an external tax audit occurred. Instead, the moment I laid the financial printouts on his desk, Richard's face turned a deep, defensive crimson. He slammed his hand on the mahogany wood, completely dismissing my detailed reports. "How dare you track my son's developmental spending, Jonathan?" he snapped, his voice dripping with sudden hostility. "Preston is the future of this company. If he needs to understand the luxury consumer landscape to expand our logistics footprint, his expenses are completely justified." Frankly, this petty jealousy proves exactly what I have been thinking lately. You have hit your professional ceiling here. You are a great bean counter, but you completely lack the modern, elite aesthetic and global vision required to represent us on a truly international stage. I sat there, utterly stunned, as the man I had saved from personal bankruptcy gaslit me about my own worth. But he was not finished. What they did not know was that I had spent the previous evening preparing for this exact scenario. I walked into my office, closed the door, and opened my laptop. I did not delete corporate files, and I did not destroy data. That would be illegal sabotage, and I am far too smart to give them legal leverage over me. And instead, I executed a series of flawless, entirely legal protective maneuvers. First, I systematically signed out of every single personal banking portal, an encrypted corporate network. I initiated a secure wipe of my personal professional data, my browser histories, and my saved credentials, ensuring that my 16 years of specialized financial shortcuts vanished from that machine forever. Next came the critical operational move. I walked over to the small network utility rack mounted inside my office closet. Connected to the primary bridge was my proprietary biometric hardware security token, a small black device hardwired to my specific encryption keys. This device was the sole mechanical bridge that allowed the company's automated financial systems to broadcast our daily compliance data stream to our primary lending bank. Without it, the bank's automated risk management platform would receive nothing but static. I meticulously detached the hardware token from the server port, dropped it into my pocket, and secured it. I was legally within my rights. The token was issued under my personal compliance license in accordance with federal banking regulations, not the company's. With 3 minutes left on the clock, I opened my email and drafted a concise, devastatingly clear, one-sentence resignation letter. I simply wrote, "Please accept this email as formal notification that I am resigning from my position as Vice President of Finance effective immediately at 9 o'clock due to a material breach of verbal contract by executive leadership." I added the head of human resources, Richard, and every single member of the board of directors to the recipient line. My finger hovered over the trackpad for a fraction of a second. I hit send. Before shutting down my laptop for the final time, I picked up my personal cell phone. I dialed a number I had kept memorized for 3 years. The direct line to the managing partner of Vanguard Logistics, our largest and most aggressive industry rival. The firm had spent the last 36 months trying to recruit me, offering me massive compensation packages that I had repeatedly turned down out of misplaced loyalty to Richard. The managing partner answered on the second ring. I informed him that I was officially a free agent and ready to negotiate. I secured a meeting for 2 o'clock that afternoon, telling him to bring his legal and acquisition teams because I was bringing a $97 million opportunity with me. I hung up, slipped my personal phone into my pocket, grabbed my briefcase, and walked out of my office. I did not look back at the rows of cubicles. I stepped into the elevator just as the digital display clicked over to exactly 9 o'clock. But as the heavy steel doors began to slide shut, locking me away from the toxic environment I had survived for 16 years, my phone began to vibrate aggressively in my hand. The caller identification flashed with Richard's office extension. That was when the corporate panic officially began, and I had no intention of looking back. By Tuesday morning, less than 24 hours after I walked out the front doors, the delicate financial house of cards that was Montgomery Logistics completely collapsed. Back at my house, I poured myself a fresh cup of coffee and opened my personal tablet, monitoring the public supply chain indexing servers. I knew exactly what was happening inside their headquarters. The moment the clock had struck midnight, the primary lending bank's automated risk algorithms attempted to ping my proprietary biometric encryption token to validate the daily compliance data stream. For the first time in 16 years, the server met absolute silence. Because my unique biometric signature was missing, the bank's security protocol triggered automatically. By 6 o'clock in the morning, the bank officially flagged Montgomery Logistics with an emergency technical default status, instantly freezing their entire $58 million rolling credit line. Inside the office, Preston was completely oblivious to the impending disaster. He strolled into the executive suite at 9:30, carrying a designer bag and acting like he owned the world. His first task as the newly appointed chief financial officer was to authorize a routine $7 million wire transfer to clear payments for our international fuel suppliers and port authorities. But when he booted up the terminal and attempted to execute the transfer, the system rejected his credentials. He tried again, typing faster, his face flushing with frustration as a flashing red notification filled the screen. Access denied. Line of credit frozen. Compliance validation missing. He was completely locked out of the primary operational banking interface. Furthermore, the automated intellectual property lock I had initiated successfully deactivated the dynamic tax routing algorithm, immediately exposing the company to massive international tariffs. Within hours, the real-world consequences of his incompetence rippled across the globe. Because the fuel payments failed to clear by the morning deadline, furious international fuel suppliers immediately issued a complete freeze on all transit operations. In major ports from Rotterdam to Singapore, massive cargo ships carrying millions of dollars in freight were suddenly halted at the docks, forbidden from unloading. The global logistics network came to an abrupt grinding standstill. The multi-million-dollar supply chain that I spent over a decade and a half perfecting became instantly paralyzed, leaving dozens of premium international clients completely stranded without their vital inventory. But that was only the beginning of their nightmare. The automated bank alert did not just freeze the money. It automatically triggered an institutional notification to our top investors and clients, detailing the severe breach of Sarbanes-Oxley compliance protocols. By 11 o'clock, the directors of our top 3 international sovereign wealth fund accounts received a critical automated red flag alert directly on their encrypted corporate screens, informing them that the designated key personnel officer had officially separated from the firm. And remember, these 3 accounts represented over 72% of the company's total annual revenue. The moment those foreign fund managers realized I was no longer personally auditing and safeguarding their capital allocations, they did not hesitate. They immediately invoked the strict 24-hour exit clauses that I had meticulously embedded into their contracts. One by one, formal legal notices began pouring into Richard's inbox, completely pulling their capital out of the company and canceling their multi-year agreements. In less than 4 hours, $97 million in projected revenues simply vanished from the company's books. By noon, the corporate headquarters was in a state of absolute unmitigated panic. The phones in the executive suite were ringing relentlessly with furious calls from port authorities, stranded ship captains, and terrified board members demanding answers. Richard Montgomery, finally realizing that something was catastrophically wrong, slammed open the glass doors of the finance department, screaming at the top of his lungs for an explanation. He expected to see a team of highly efficient corporate accountants fixing a minor system glitch. Instead, he found his son Preston weeping hysterically at his mahogany desk, completely paralyzed by fear. Preston was surrounded by an overwhelming pile of printed banking errors and federal compliance warnings he could not comprehend, utterly unable to read a basic corporate general ledger or understand how to navigate an international institutional credit freeze. Every single bit of his unearned executive arrogance had completely evaporated into thin air. Richard stood frozen in the center of the room, looking at the flashing red warning screens, a cold sweat breaking out across his forehead as he finally realized the catastrophic scale of his mistake. He turned to the remaining junior finance staff, his voice shaking with absolute desperation as he ordered them to pull up my employment file immediately. He began screaming at his team to track down my personal home address and my private cell phone number, suddenly realizing that his entire $135 million empire was actively evaporating by the minute. On Tuesday afternoon, my personal cell phone began vibrating continuously on my kitchen counter. It did not stop for 4 hours. Richard called me exactly 50 times in a single afternoon. When I did not answer, the text messages and voicemails began piling up, providing a fascinating psychological study in sudden desperate corporate panic. He screamed that I was abandoning my post, violating my explicit fiduciary duties, and that he would have the corporate legal team sue me for every single penny I owned if I did not return to the office immediately. He also threatened me over the disabled tax algorithm. But as the hours ticked by and the global shipping ports remained completely paralyzed, his tone shifted dramatically. By 4 o'clock, the anger was completely gone, replaced by a pathetic desperation. His voice cracked in the final voicemail, begging me to tell him how to unfreeze the credit line and offering to discuss my salary. I did not call him back. Instead, I silenced my phone and spent the afternoon enjoying a luxurious, long-overdue professional spa day. For the first time in 16 years, I was not monitoring a global supply chain or rushing to fix an artificial corporate emergency. Spending the afternoon in total relaxation while their entire empire fractured under the weight of their own incompetence was the most satisfying corporate clearance I could have ever imagined. By Wednesday morning, the panic reached the absolute top. I received a formal email from the chairman of the board of directors desperately requesting an emergency video conference at 10 o'clock. When I logged into the meeting from my new personal tablet, I was not sitting in a cramped cubicle down by transit. I was sitting comfortably in a beautiful sunlit executive office holding a fresh cup of coffee. On the screen, the entire board looked completely terrified. Richard sat in the center looking as though he had aged 10 years. His suit was unpressed, his eyes were bloodshot, and his hands shook visibly. Preston was completely absent, likely still hiding in his office weeping. Richard practically wept on camera, apologizing for the massive miscommunication and offering me a base salary of $600,000 a year and an immediate 20% equity stake if I would just sign the banking compliance papers and restore the software license. I took a slow, deliberate sip of my coffee, looking directly into the camera lens. The entire board held their breath, waiting for my savior complex to kick in. But that loyal version of Jonathan Vance was permanently dead. "Your offer is 16 years too late, Richard," I said, my voice completely calm, carrying a quiet, devastating weight. "I decline. And you should know that I signed an exclusive contract yesterday afternoon to become the senior managing partner at Vanguard Logistics. Furthermore, because of your sheer incompetence and your blatant violations of federal banking regulations, the directors of your top 3 sovereign wealth funds have already finalized their contract cancellations with you. They are currently sitting right outside my new office, waiting for me to sign historic new logistical agreements directly with my new firm. You will also be receiving formal legal documentation regarding your unauthorized attempts to access my patented intellectual property. Have a wonderful rest of your fiscal quarter, gentlemen." I clicked the button, ending the call mid-sentence, leaving the entire board staring at a dead black screen as their empire collapsed into absolute dust. The aftermath of that single call was swift, brutal, and entirely predictable. Unable to recover from the massive freeze on their rolling credit line, the devastating tariffs, and the instantaneous loss of 72% of their annual revenue, Montgomery Logistics began a rapid public death spiral. Within less than 6 months, the once mighty firm collapsed under the weight of its own debt and filed for complete bankruptcy. The board of directors and furious betrayed investors aggressively ousted Richard from his own company, stripping him of his remaining stock and forcing a predatory fire sale to Vanguard Logistics. Richard lost his entire personal fortune, his luxury estate, and the pristine professional reputation he spent a lifetime building. As for Preston, his corporate career was permanently ruined before it ever truly began. He became a cautionary tale across the entire corporate logistics industry, permanently blacklisted from ever holding an executive financial position again. Meanwhile, my transition to Vanguard Logistics was nothing short of legendary. I was given absolute operational freedom and a massive compensation package. The top 3 international sovereign wealth fund clients transitioned smoothly with me, bringing their entire $97 million capital allocations over to Vanguard on my very first day. The moment my new contract was finalized, I used my immense professional leverage to execute a complete rescue operation for the junior finance team I had left behind, hiring every single one of them at Vanguard Logistics with massive 40% salary increases. Together, We built a new, far more powerful logistics infrastructure that dominated the global market within our very first quarter. My quiet, calculated exit did not break their company. It simply proved an undeniable truth to the entire corporate world. I was never just an employee holding their machine together. I was the empire all along.